Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Before we start with our today's analysis, we have an announcement. BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS will be launching Target Prelims 2022 crash course. This will start from tomorrow, which is 5th of April, and it will go up to 24th May 2022. What is so unique about this program? We do run the prelims crash course on our YouTube, which is only about the current affairs, the dynamic portions. Added to these dynamic portions, what we are planning to launch this time is the static discussion. The static discussion along with the current affairs is free and will be exclusively available on the BYJU'S exam prep application. So what is that you have to do? Download this application and you would be able to witness this static part as well as the current affairs part. Students will be provided with a daily revision plan, time bound revision of the current affairs and static part, and daily mock test where you would be able to understand where you stand in this preparation module. So what you have to do? Follow the link given in the description box, which will give you the schedule of the static part and also the current affairs related module. And at the same time, what you have to do is download this application so that you would be able to watch these videos. Now let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says the key takeaways of UNEP report on noise pollution. This article here is speaking about noise pollution. Before we understand what this article is all about, let's understand what is noise pollution. What do you understand by noise? When we speak about noise, what is it? It is the disturbing sound. What is it? It is over loud voice. So in this particular backdrop, noise is nothing but unwanted sound which may have health related implications and might disturb the well-being of an individual. So what is noise pollution? Noise pollution is nothing but extreme unwanted disturbing sound in that particular locality. How do we measure the noise pollution? When we speak about noise pollution, what is it? It is unwanted sound. When we speak about sound, how do we measure sound? Sound is measured in decibels, which is what we have in the form of dB. So it is a logarithmic scale, decibel, which is the standard unit for measurement of the sound. The softest sound that we would be able to hear by the human ear is what is called a 0 decibel. So remember, the softest which the humans would be able to listen is the 0 decibel, and if we take 10 decibel, it means that it is 10 times more in the logarithmic scale, and this means if it goes on increasing, that will be a major problem to the human beings. If we speak about the breathing, it is about 10 decibel, whispering 15 decibel, typewriting it is 50 decibel, loud conversation it is 70 decibel. When we speak about trains, it is about 110 decibel, jet plane it is 120 decibel, volcano eruption is about 190 decibel. So a single source of exposure, anything greater than 150 decibels, is also known to cause permanent injury to the ear's internal mechanism. So remember, many of the noise researchers have said that noise levels in excess of 90 will also be a major irritant to the human beings. What are the laws in India when it comes to the noise pollution? One of the important laws that we have is Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1981. In the very same law, it speaks about air pollutant, which means any solid, liquid or gaseous substances including noise present in the atmosphere in such concentration as may be or tend to be injurious to the human beings or other living creatures or plants or property or the environment. So the law which speaks about noise pollution is present in Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1981. So what are the sources of pollution? When we speak about the sources of pollution or causes of noise pollution, we can break them down into two important sources. One is what is called as the industrial sources. The other is the non-industrial sources. What are these industrial sources? Those sounds or the noise pollution which emanates from the industries is what is called as the industrial sources. For example, boilers, machineries, floor mills, cutting machines which are present in the industry, which can lead to unwanted sound, which can lead to loud voice. In such situation, whatever emanates from the industry is what is called as industrial sources. So the growing industries in the urban areas are a major cause of noise pollution these days, which uses various machines that are capable of generating a large amount of noise. So the first part is what is called as industrial sources. Then we also have the non-industrial sources. What are these non-industrial sources? Anything apart from the industrial is what is called as non-industrial sources. Let's say for example the loudspeakers or the social events, improper planning of the urban areas, vehicles and transportation, noise that is emanating from the construction site. All of this means that it is the non-industrial resource. When we speak about the social events, let's say for example there is an event. It can be any of the premises in your area where they have these huge loudspeakers, and these loudspeakers are a major menace to the noise pollution. So we have other issues like the vehicle and transportation, which can also be a major problem. Honking of the horns would be a major problem, and you would also have these RX100 Yamaha bikes as well, where they also change the silencer sound. This is also a major irritant. So we have the important sources like the industrial sources, and we also have the non-industrial sources, which includes improper planning in the urban areas, social events, vehicles and transportation, and construction sites, which include mining, construction of bridges, dams, also contribute to the noise pollution. Now the question is, how will it impact the health? When we speak about pollution, let's speak about air pollution or water pollution. Any pollution will have health related impact on the people. Similarly, noise pollution also has impact on the people. What will it lead to? It will lead to hypertension. Longer exposure to loud noise results in elevated blood levels, which can cause hypertension in the humans. Hearing disability, constant exposure to loud noise which is beyond the range of normal sound intensity can damage the eardrums, thus resulting in hearing disability. Sleeping disorders. Imagine that you are sleeping in your room, there is constant noise that is coming outside, your peace will be disturbed, your sleep will be disturbed, and ultimately you would not be able to showcase your productivity when it comes to the office premises. Why? Because we require 6 to 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and if there is disturbed sleep, your brain will not allow you to have attention for a larger period of time, and ultimately the productivity in your office premises will also drop as well. This may also lead to cardiovascular issues as well. Loud noises also result in increase in normal blood pressure and causes several cardiovascular diseases in a normal person. Added to it, it can also result in physiological and psychological stress, and this can also lead to coronary heart disease and diabetes. If we have to consider the statistics as given under this article, estimates suggest that in Europe 22 million and 6.5 million people suffer from chronic noise annoyance and sleep disturbance. Long-term exposure to environmental noise contributes to about 48,000 new cases of heart disease and causes 12,000 premature deaths annually in Europe. The elderly, pregnant women, shift workers are among those at risk of noise induced because of the sleep disturbance. Two 15-year-long studies of long-term residents of Toronto in Canada found that exposure to road traffic noise elevated risks of acute myocardial infarction and congestive heart failure, and increased the incidence of type 2 diabetes, and it also caused hypertension as well. These are some of the impact because of the noise pollution. Now, if we have to speak about India, what are the laws that are present in India? Which is the institution which controls the noise pollution, and what is that we have to do when it comes to the noise pollution? When we speak about India, we have the Central Pollution Control Board. The Central Pollution Control Board is given the authority to manage the noise pollution in the country. So what will it do? It will make sure that noise is controlled in and around the country. So what will it do? It will have all these sensors installed in the cities. It will keep monitoring it, and in case it exceeds, the executive authority will have to go to that particular place and take down measures in order to prevent the noise pollution. Added to it, the executive authorities in the districts will also be able to make use of the criminal procedure code. We have two important sections. One happens to be section 133, the other happens to be section 144. The power is given to the executive where in case they feel that noise pollution is emanating, disturbing the peace in that particular locality, they would be able to make use of these sections and ultimately authorize conditional orders whereby noise pollution can also be controlled. Added to it, we also have the Supreme Court of India in the state of Rajasthan versus G. Chawla, which has clearly said that we have the state list. Under state list, we have entry 8 in the state list, which speaks about public health and sanitation. So the states would also have the right to control loud noises and noise pollution, said the Supreme Court of India when it comes to state of Rajasthan versus G. Chawla. So what is that we understand here? We understand that we have a central pollution control board which is able to prevent it. Then we also have the powers given to the executive authority, and ultimately we also have the Supreme Court which has assured the state governments that, dear state governments, you have the power to come up with laws, rules and regulations so that you can prevent the noise pollution in that particular area, which is the power given to you under entry 8, which speaks about public health and sanitation, which is part of 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. What is that we have to do going forward? We have to initiate a public debate. Basically, we have to understand where is the noise coming from. So agenda setting goes into picture. So we have to assess where is the problem of noise pollution. So the problem analysis will have to be taken. Then if the problem is emanating from a particular region or throughout the country, what we have to do is come up with a policy formulation. Then after this policy is made, this has to be adapted, and once this is done, this has to be implemented, and finally whether this particular model is successful or not, a pilot program can be run in couple of cities. If it is successful, implement the same in couple of other cities and the villages, and if it is not, bring about policy changes. So ultimately make sure that this noise pollution that we have is completely reduced. So who are the players involved in this? We will have the government, we will have the civil society, we would also have the private players, we would also have the industrialists, and these industrialists will also come up with the technology updations as well, and such technology updations can be used in a particular city. Apart from this initiative which happens at the political level, what are the other ways of controlling the noise pollution? Highway traffic should be diverted through bypasses and overbridges and should not be allowed to pass through the towns and the cities. Soundproof chambers should be installed for the machines generating the loud noise. To provide protective devices like earmuffs or cotton plugs to the workers who work in various industries and construction sites. To enforce acoustic zoning by distancing human settlements from industrial areas, aerodromes and railway stations. And finally, silent zones which should be created for educational institutions, hospitals and important offices. These are some of the measures that we would be able to take up in order to mitigate the impact of noise pollution. Now, what is the context according to the article? According to Annual Frontier Report 2022 published by United Nations Environmental Programme, Uttar Pradesh Moradabad is the second most noise polluted city globally. So according to it, it says that noise pollution is at an ear splitting 114 decibels at its highest in the year 2021. According to this report, which is the most noisiest city, it happens to be Dhaka. But what this article says is that this particular data given by the UNEP is not in sync with the reality, says this article. Why is it not in sync with the reality? That is because there have been number of studies that have been conducted in the past with respect to the Moradabad, but none of these studies have pointed out that Moradabad is one of the noisiest cities. Added to it, there is no mention of the city in any of the scientific reports. In fact, if you speak to the authorities in this particular city, they also say that there are no sensors installed by the UNEP to measure such data in Moradabad. So they go on to say that this data which says that Moradabad happens to be one of the noisiest cities, second placed after Dhaka, may not be right, says this article. So there are many other cities in India, but Moradabad is a controversial one because the studies does not show so, the scientific reports does not show so, and they do not have the sensors that are present in this city to measure the noise pollution, says this article. So basically this article currently goes on to say that this whole issue of Moradabad becoming the second noisiest city in the world may not be right, says this article. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says making groundwater visible. The article here is speaking about the importance of groundwater. When we speak about the World Water Day, it is held on 22nd March every year since 1993. It focuses on the importance of fresh water. What exactly happened? This particular day is celebrated on March 22nd every year. So this is about raising the awareness of the water, the importance of the water, and at the same time it is also about tackling the global water crisis. The theme for the year 2022 World Water Day happens to be groundwater, making the invisible visible. So this article here is basically giving us an idea about the groundwater. So what is this groundwater? When we speak about groundwater, it is nothing but the underground water. You have the land here. If the water is present underground in aquifers beneath the land, that is what is called as groundwater. Then we also have the surface water. We can take the example of lakes, we can take the example of rivers, but when it comes to the underground water, it is the water which is present underground in aquifers. Now the question is, why should we care about the groundwater? Groundwater is being overused in many areas without focus on the sustainability. We know for the fact that we have Article 21. Article 21 speaks about right to life. An aspect of right to life is the healthy water, clean water. If clean water is not provided, this could ultimately mean that people would be the major sufferers because we extract a lot of water and sustainability is not taken into picture. A massive extraction of groundwater could impact the future citizens is what is the first major issue. The second major problem is the groundwater pollution. The third issue is we do not know how much of groundwater is present in a particular area. Let's say we have one of the areas A. Let's take another example, area B. Will it be the same when it comes to the groundwater concentration? Not necessarily. So ideally, what we should be able to develop is to understand how much of groundwater is present in area A, how much of groundwater is present in area B, and how is it being utilized, which we are not knowing. So identifying this area and how much of groundwater is present in that area is also a key resource when it comes to the sustainable management. The International Conference on Groundwater, Key to Sustainable Developmental Goals, and the UN Water Summit on Groundwater are part of global initiatives to highlight the significance of groundwater in a sustainable development. So what are we looking at? We are looking at importance of the groundwater, exploring, protecting and ensuring that there is sustainable use of the groundwater. So this article here pays an extreme importance to the role of the groundwater when it comes to agriculture, industry, ecosystem, climate change, adaptation, so on and so forth, and ultimately says its value has not been recognized by the government when it comes to the policy making. So what are the concerns with respect to this issue? So whenever we speak about groundwater, what are the major issues? One is the depletion of the stored groundwater. The annual groundwater extraction in India stood at around 248.69 billion cubic meters back in the year 2017. So what is happening? There are multiple sources of water. You can take the example of surface water, you can take the example of rivers, you can take the example of lakes, you can take the example of groundwater as well. So when it comes to the groundwater, what is India doing? It is extracting maximum water. Ideally, there will be something called as a sustainable recharge. If countries are not able to meet up to the sustainable recharge, this could be a problematic for the future generation. When it comes to few areas, we are able to meet up to the sustainable parameter, but in number of states like Punjab, Rajasthan, Haryana, Delhi, Chandigarh, Himachal Pradesh, Tamil Nadu and Puducherry, we are extracting so much that in the near future, the sustainability of the groundwater may become a tougher job. So the first major issue is depletion of the stored groundwater where there is maximum extraction, and this may not result in the sustainable transfer of groundwater for the future generation. This is the first concern. The second is in reference to the deterioration of quality. What do we mean by it? High level of extraction will ultimately mean the quality of the groundwater will also get compromised. What do we mean by it? Let's say, for example, when we are extracting a lot of water, it can result in fluoride pollution, and there can also be nitrates as well, and this may ultimately impact the health. Biological contamination can also take place, chemical contamination can also take place, and when there is maximum water that is extracted, this will ultimately harm the health of the individuals. So the second major concern is deterioration of the quality of water when there is excessive extraction happening and sustainability is not given importance in that particular locality. The third is in reference to lack of recognition to the importance of groundwater. What do we mean by it? When we speak about the groundwater, what exactly happens? The government will have to take into picture the local needs, the district needs, the state needs, and everything has to be taken into picture. It is not just about the surface water, it is not just about water that is coming from the river. The government should also have to take into picture how much of water is extracted from the ground, which means this has to be included as part of the policy making. But number of states have failed on this front. They consider the surface water, they consider the river water, where this river water is moved from one state to another, where this river water is moved from one district to another. What we also have is interlinking of the rivers, but we have failed to make sure the groundwater is also considered as part of the policy making. So we have considered the rivers, we have considered the lakes, we have ensured that water is transferred from one place to another, but the problem is we are extracting a lot of groundwater. This is not part of the state policy making. The fourth major concern is in reference to the issue of ownership. What do we mean by it? It means there is currently no central law on the groundwater regulation, but we have one of the laws called as the Indian Easement Act. What is this easement basically? Easement is a right that is given to the occupier of a land. Let's say, for example, you have your own house. What do you have? You also have a borewell as well. Just because you hold that plot of land, it also means that you would be able to dig a borewell. You would be able to use maximum amount of water after the borewell is dug. This means that the state will have no control on this part of a community resource, but this becomes a private resource for you. Just because you have a private land, just because you're able to dig a borewell, you would be able to extract maximum water, which is the groundwater. But in this particular case, the state has no control on the groundwater. So the law clearly says that the water below the surface belongs to the landowner, but unfortunately, water is a community resource where the government is not controlling, is the fourth major concern. Finally, what we have is a fragmented approach to the management, where the existing approach of dealing with surface water and groundwater are different. When we speak about rivers, lakes, we have one management protocol, but when we speak about the groundwater, we do not have enough rules and regulations, and one such is in reference to the easement, where an easement is the right that the owner or the occupier of that land possesses for the beneficial enjoyment of that land. So what is the way forward? What are the measures that we have to take? As of now, we have a splintered approach, which means we have a separate approach for the surface level water. We also have a separate approach for the groundwater. In number of cases, we do not have an approach for the groundwater. So what we require is an integrated water management. So what is this integrated water management? Surface water, groundwater should not be seen in silos, but instead it has to be seen in unity. So water is water, irrespective of what is the derivative. We have to ensure that water is taken as a comprehensive whole. So we have the Mihir Shah committee, which said that the Central Water Commission and the Central Groundwater Board should be united, and a national water framework with an integrated perspective will have to be developed. So as of now, these are in separate compartments. This has to be seen as an objective criteria and not as a subjective criteria layer of surface water and groundwater. Then we have to look at the local level plants. What are these local level plants? Let's say for example, there might be a particular surface water in one region, or there might not be a surface water in another region. So what you have in that particular locality, in that region, the same will have to be utilized. So what policies you have for one region may not be applicable in another region. So what is that the administrative authorities have to do? They have to find out what is good for that particular locality and devise a plan accordingly. So the second major recommendation is to come up with local level plans. So the local level plan need not be same across the entire state, across the entire district, but what we have to find out is the uniqueness for that particular region and ultimately implement it. The third recommendation is to make use of the sustainable water usage, which means we know for the fact that this is the amount of groundwater present in that particular area. So depending on the irrigation facilities, depending upon the groundwater present in that particular locality, we have to make sure that certain crops are grown in that region. So basically, what are we doing here? We are identifying the water resource in that particular area and allowing suitable crops to grow in that area. For example, ragi can be grown. For example, jowar can be grown, and at the same time, we can also have bajra, which can be grown in those areas where there is less amount of water. So identifying how much of water we have and identifying the crops required for such water should be identified and grown in a specific region. And finally, legal framework and introduction of the groundwater usage charges will have to be introduced by the government. As of now, we did discuss about the Indian Easement Act, and we did discuss that there are not much rules and regulations when it comes to the community product. So water happens to be one of the important resource for the community, but it is being consumed as a private resource. So going forward, the government should come up with a legislative framework so that this is not being used in far excess, so that every single person has adequate amount of water. In case they are using more groundwater or excessive water, the same will have to be imposed as charges on such personalities. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about marital rape. We have discussed about the marital rape in number of CNAs in the past. But what are we going to discuss today? We will be discussing about one of the landmark judgments given by the Karnataka High Court with respect to Rishikesh Saho versus the state of Karnataka, where it has said that exception given under IPC section 375 with respect to the husband is not right, says the Karnataka High Court. When we look into section 375, what does it speak about? It speaks about rape. What is rape? A man is said to commit rape who, except in case hereinafter accepted, has sexual intercourse with a woman under circumstances falling under any of these descriptions, which means against her will. So there is a woman who is not given consent to a man, and this goes against the will of that particular woman, that is assumed to be a rape. Then without her consent, with her consent, when her consent has been obtained by putting her or any person in whom she is interested in fear of death or hurt. What do we mean by it? It means, let's say for example, the first and the second condition speaks about the consent, but the third condition says that the woman is giving the consent, but such a consent is not voluntary. This is being forced on the woman. So you either give her a death threat, or you would say that you would commit murder of that particular person, which is why she is giving a consent. Added to it, she might also give consent if you're threatening to kill someone else, you're threatening to do some injury to another person. As a result, there is no voluntary consent, but there is forced consent in this particular backdrop. Even that is considered as rape. Fourthly, with her consent, when the man knows that he is not her husband and that her consent is given because she believes that he is another man to whom she is or believes herself to be lawfully married. Fifthly, with her consent, when at the time of giving such consent, by reason of unsoundness of mind or intoxication or administration by him personally or through another of stupefying or unwholesome substance, she is unable to understand the nature and consequences of that to which she has given the consent. What do we mean by it? There is a person who's got the unsound mind. She is not able to take the independent decision, or she is in that intoxicated mode, which means she is not in her senses. She does not know the consequences, what might happen, because this person has drugged her or given her a lot of alcohol, where she is not able to know the consequences of such an action. Even in this case, if a girl happens to give consent where she is not knowing the consequences of this, that will also be considered as a rape. Now do note, in section 375 we have an exception. What does the exception say? It says sexual intercourse by a man with his own wife, the wife not being under 15 years of age, is not rape, which means there is an exception, which is if a man and a woman have entered into a wedlock, they are husband and wife. If a rape is committed by a man on his woman who happens to be his wife, in that case it is not rape, says section 375 of the Indian Penal Code. Setting aside this legislative backing, we now have the Karnataka High Court, which said even if it is her husband who's committed the rape on a woman who is his wife in such a position, this is also considered as rape. And when it is considered as rape, whatever punishment is imposed under section 376 will be imposed on that person. So until now, there was a particular parameter which said that if it is a man who is the husband of that particular woman happens to rape that woman, there was an exception and such was not considered rape. But the landmark judgment of Karnataka High Court has come in the form of Rishikesh Saho versus State of Karnataka, where it says even if it is the husband committing such an offense, a rape is a rape irrespective of who does it. So this article currently goes on to say that according to the Karnataka High Court, what we have seen is a landmark judgment with respect to the marital rape. Now what we have to understand is how is that this law came into the Indian Penal Code. What is the fundamental to this particular law? We have to go back to the common law system, where we have used most of our laws from the British laws. So if you look into the British laws, back in the year, this particular principle came from Chief Justice Matthew Haley of Britain in 1976. So this is a common law, this is a British law. This is why it was introduced in the Indian Penal Code as well, where we were able to import some of the concepts from the Britain law. But in the year 1991, this exception of the marital rape was completely done away in the R versus R. So this was a landmark judgment in 1991 given by the court in the United Kingdom, where this marital rape exception was completely taken away. But in spite of this law taken away in Britain, we had these laws in our system. So this article says that now we are in sync with the 1991 judgment of the United Kingdom, where the United Kingdom judgment completely deleted this exception, and whatever judgment is given by the Karnataka High Court is in sync with the 1991 judgment of the United Kingdom. So the exception which was given to the husband with respect to his wife is now done away with according to the judgment given by the Karnataka High Court. We will have more editorials and columns in the near future. We will take them up elaborately once again. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about UPSC. We did also recently discuss in our big news with respect to the UPSC. So what is it about? The Union Home Ministry has decided to considerably reduce the number of disturbed areas under UPSC in 3 states. Which are these 3 states? One, Nagaland. Second happens to be Assam. Third happens to be Manipur. In Nagaland, UPSC was removed from the jurisdiction of 15 police stations in 7 districts, but it remains in place in 57 police stations in 13 districts. The relaxation has been more substantial in Assam, where it has been removed entirely from 23 districts and partially from 1, thus limiting its operation fully to only 9 districts. And similarly, in certain other districts, UPSC has been removed in Manipur as well. So what is the concern here? There have been number of human rights activists, there have been number of civil society organizations, people who want this UPSC to be completely removed. But as of now it is not completely removed, but the gravity is comparatively reduced where it has been removed in number of pockets. Why did the central government come up with such an initiative? That is because it feels in these areas there is not much of internal disturbance, and as a result they went ahead by removing AFSPA in these so-called disturbed areas. Added to it, we also have to look at what has happened in the past. We have the Supreme Court Judge BP Jeevan Reddy, who was appointed in 2005. According to BP Jeevan Reddy Committee, it had clearly said that this AFSPA as a law should be completely deleted. So he had suggested that there has to be repealing of the law. Added to it, Justice N. Santosh Hegde Committee in 2013, which investigated encounter killings in Manipur, suggested that the act must be properly reviewed every 6 months to see if its implementation is necessary. So it has to be reviewed every 6 months. If there are issues and concerns with respect to the implementation, the same will have to be rectified or it should not be imposed, says Santosh Hegde Committee. But in spite of it, we continue to have AFSPA. So this has to be revisited because the human rights organizations, the civil society organizations have been asking for the removal of AFSPA. However, the security parameter will also have to be taken into picture. So there has to be a balance is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Successful noise management should be based on fundamental principles of precaution, the polluter pays principle and the prevention discussed. The existing approach of dealing with the surface water and groundwater independently has severe limitations. In the light of the statement, suggest ways to protect and conserve groundwater. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review. Do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.